Welcome to tonight's Q&A. I'm Allison Grant Lounes. I'm the author of Foolproof French Visas, your complete guide to getting the right visa type for moving to France. I run Your Franceformation, a company that helps people to get the right visa, do their visa applications, set up their businesses, and generally relocate so that they can follow their dream of living in France. I run the Americans in France Facebook group, which has about 15,000 members in it now. And tonight's Q&A is just a free event. We're going to get to know each other a little bit. I'm going to answer some of your questions about moving to France, about visas, about anything except COVID, basically. I don't do COVID questions. And then if you would like to pursue opportunities to have an individual conversation to get your questions answered more in depth, or to discuss actually working with me and my team on your French visa application, we can do that as well. I have the questions that were submitted in advance, and so I'm going to start with those, but feel free as we progress to type in the chat or to type in the Q&A box, and I'll be able to see your questions there as well. So, the first question is from Gail, and her first question is, as an American, do you need to buy a visa to buy a vacation property? And the answer to that question is no. If you have a vacation property in France and you don't spend more than 90 out of 180 days at that property in Schengen, then you do not have to have a visa. If you want to spend more than 90 days at a time, then you would have to apply for a visa. And if you eventually want to live here permanently, then you would also need a visa for that. The second question is, as an American, do you need a will re-buying a property in terms of who will inherit the property? Yes, you will need to talk to a French notaire and to make sure that that property is going to go to who you want it to go to. And part of that is going to depend on French inheritance rules. And part of that is going to depend on whether or not you're a French resident when you die. The answer to that question is going to be slightly different based on where you're living. French inheritance rules are very complex. They don't allow you to, for example, disinherit your children or any of your children. People who are not biologically related to you will pay a much higher tax rate on any inheritance. So you definitely want to make sure to discuss those issues with a French notaire before becoming a permanent resident of France, certainly before dying here. There is a notaire in the Americans in France group. He's also in the Strictly Legal and Strictly Fiscal Facebook groups as well, which are not run by me. His name is Christophe Dutertre, and he specializes in international estate planning, and he is an excellent resource. We also have in the Fast Track to France program, which we have created for our clients, which is available for helping people decide if and how they're moving to France and what the parameters of that move are going to be. And we have a module on wills and estate planning and things like that to sort of help you get your thoughts in order and to understand what the issues are before actually meeting with a notaire. That's a major issue that people can have. And we're not attorneys or accountants or notaires at Your Franceformation, but we know what the issues are from working with so many American clients on their relocation. So we sort of point you in the right direction in terms of what you'll need to know before and talk to others about before you move. All right. Ruth, to stay in France for at least a year, what would be the required visa type? You will need one of 27 different kinds of long stay visa. I would recommend, if you're not sure what visa type would be best for you, I would recommend starting by reading my book, Foolproof French Visas. It's available in paperback on Amazon, and I'm going to give you the link to check it out on our website right now as well. But there are a lot of different kinds, and it basically depends on what your income sources are going to be and whether or not you want the option to stay long-term in France. So you're going to have to, I recommend reading the book because it will tell you exactly in what situation you want which visa types. Give you the Amazon link as well. All right. Her second question is, would I need to be a student or working to stay for at least a year? Again, that depends. You're going to have to look at the book and see what your financial situation is, see what your long-term goals are, and then look at the visa types that correspond to, if you want to potentially stay long-term, then your options are going to be a bit different versus if you only want to stay for a short amount of time. All right. Erin, can you address the issue of the trailing spouse if one member of the couple applies for a profession libérale visa? What type of visa should the non-entrepreneur spouse apply for that will also eventually lead to residency? So there's two questions here. One is, if you apply for a profession libérale, what does your spouse get? And the answer is, by default, a trailing spouse would get a visitor visa, which you would have to show that you're going to have the income and resources to provide for 2 people, and then more, obviously, if you have children as well. But the spouse can also apply for a completely different visa type with completely different circumstances. So the spouse could apply for their own profession libérale visa. They could apply for a student visa. They could apply for a salaried work visa, depending on their situation. And again, this is where foolproof French visa is going to really come in handy. Now, depending on the type of business or activity you're going to be starting with the profession libérale visa, and depending on your actual professional resources or personal financial resources, sometimes what I recommend is, if both spouses want to work, go for the passeport talent entrepreneur. Even in businesses where it might not otherwise be a great idea because you don't have a lot of startup costs, you don't need a lot of capital, you don't have a business that would normally require setting up an actual French company from the beginning. And the reason for that is because the passeport talent is advantageous in the sense that the trailing spouse gets a vie privée, a passeport talent vie privée visa. And that particular visa type enables the spouse to also work. Now, the spouse can work in the company, the spouse can set up as an auto entrepreneur, the spouse can start their own completely different business and company, the spouse can go get a part-time job like working at McDonald's just to get out of the house and keep busy. It really doesn't matter. There's no particular minimum income requirement or type of work contract requirement for the spouse of a passeport talent visa holder, carte de séjour holder. So if that's an option for you, then I tend to recommend that, just because it makes life for the other partner so much easier. That being said, passport talent isn't always a great idea, and some people just don't want or don't have the 30,000 euros to invest in starting that company. So in that case, I guess the second part of your question is really, if the second spouse is on a visitor visa, will they be able to eventually apply for naturalization? And the answer to that question is yes. Normally, if you're on a visitor visa, you can't really apply for residency or naturalization because you're not making enough money or you're not making money that gets taxed in France. However, you should know that income taxes in France are based on the couple or the family's global revenue. So even if the non-profession libérale spouse is not earning their own income, they would still be covered under sort of the umbrella of the family resources. So if that's the case, if you're in a profession libérale situation and your spouse is not working, then you just need to make sure that you meet the income requirement to support 2 people. So you'd have to have higher income, but your spouse would be able to apply jointly with you for residency or for naturalization down the line. There's also the idea which is, once one partner has been a resident of France for more than 18 months, then the joining spouse will get a residency permit or can apply for a residency permit at that time. There's a question in the Q&A. If I have French citizenship, but my wife doesn't, will she need a visa? Is there a specific visa for the situation? Yes. So if you are a French citizen, then your spouse can get a visa called vie privée et familiale and apply, and that's a visa to live in France with a French partner, a French spouse. You have to do a couple of things in order to get this visa. One is your marriage has to be registered in France. Now, if you got married in France, then you'll have a French marriage certificate and a livret de famille that was given to you by the mayor when you got married in the mairie. If you did not get married in France, then there's a procedure where you have to go through the French embassy in the country where you got married and submit a copy of your marriage certificate, your birth certificates, and a couple of other documents. We've helped clients go through the process before. I married my French husband outside of the US, so I did it for myself. And it takes about 6 to 8 weeks to get a livret de famille and to get a document called a transcription de mariage, which is when the French consulate or the French embassy tells the service d'état civil des Français à l'étranger in Nantes that you are married, and they basically create a French copy of your marriage certificate. Now, this is also the case if you are French and you have a child outside of France and you want that child to have French citizenship. You need to register their birth with the embassy, who then in turn registers the birth certificate with the service d'état civil in Nantes, and they issue a French birth certificate for the child. So once you have those two documents, the French marriage certificate transcription and the livret de famille, then you can apply for a spousal visa through VFS. Now, this procedure, both of those procedures are detailed in Foolproof French Visas. We help people to apply for those visas as well. The process is really straightforward for the spouse of a French citizen. Like they can't require any proof of financial resources. They don't have to require proof of health insurance. It's basically just marriage certificate, passport, photos. It's a very easy visa to get. If they want to deny you a visa for the spouse of a French citizen, they have to provide a written letter of motivation about why the visa application is being rejected. There's also the option of, if you are a French person and you've been married to your non-French spouse for more than 5 years, and you've been registered in the country where you have been living, your spouse can actually apply for French citizenship through marriage, even without having lived in France. And if that's the case, then she would have to prove that she speaks French to a B1 level, which is advanced beginner, low intermediate. And then the process for applying for French citizenship outside of France is actually fairly straightforward and easy compared to doing it within France. So that's an option as well, depending on when you plan to move, but it does take time. I'm going to go back to the pre-submitted questions, but again, feel free if you have questions to put them in the chat or to put them in the Q&A box. Okay, Nicole's question is, I want to find out how the French pension system works when you pay into their social program from your work income. How much would I need to contribute to qualify for distributions? Okay, so this is a better question for an accountant. I can give you sort of an overview, but in terms of how much you'll get paid out, who knows? The way retirement works when you work in multiple countries is there's a treaty between France and the United States, in addition to the tax treaty, called the Social Security Totalization Agreement. Now, we have a video that goes into this agreement in detail in Fast Track to France, because obviously contributing to retirement and pensions and understanding how these things work is integral to making your decision about whether or not living here long-term and working here potentially is a good move for you. The way that the Social Security Totalization Agreement works is that quarters that you work in both countries will count towards your total number of quarters worked towards retirement. So for example, if you work 20 years in France and 20 years in the US, you will contribute 20 years worth of contributions in both countries, but the total number of work time will be acknowledged by both countries as being 40 years. However, each pension system will pay out based on your best work years in that country. So instead of getting one larger pension, you'll get two small pensions, one from each place. I can't go into more specifics about how much it'll cost, how long you'll have to contribute, how much you'll eventually get, because one, nobody knows, and two, it depends even within the same year, it depends on your overall salary, how much you've paid in, whether you took off any time for maternity leave or additional education, what your biggest salary years were, what country that salary was in. It's a little bit difficult to predict without you having ever actually worked in France. All right. I will say one more thing on the retirement situation. It is very difficult to save independently from retirement outside of the pension system if you were an American in France. Now, that's for a couple of reasons. One is that the IRS significantly disadvantages any investments made into retirement vehicles outside of the US. So anything that a normal French person would invest into, accounts like an assurance vie or like some different real estate investments that are very advantageous in terms of French taxes, all of those, any advantage that you get on your French taxes, you will lose it and pay the difference to the IRS and possibly with penalties as well. So it's not a good idea to invest in basically any tax advantage retirement account in France. On the US side, if you don't have taxable income in the US, meaning your adjusted gross income is low or zero because you've taken the foreign earned income exclusion from being a bona fide resident of a foreign country, then you don't have any taxable income that you can then contribute into a retirement account in the US. So that causes a problem. And that's something to certainly talk to an accountant or a financial advisor about. I do have some recommendations that I give to my clients to ask their financial advisors or accountants about, and make sure you're working with an accountant who understands the French system as well as the American system so that they can make appropriate recommendations. Because, you know, a lot of times a CPA in the US who doesn't work with a lot of international clients, they're just not gonna know, especially if they don't understand French taxes at all. Heather. I'm looking at a student visa for an M1 and M2, a 2-year program, or just an M2 for 1 year, and wonder if 2 years is required in order to be able to be hired by a French employer while still on the student visa, and or to qualify to switch to the job seeker visa or other type of visa. It might be better financially and timing of being on the job market before the Olympics to finish in 1 year. But if that affects access to jobs and other visa types, that would be a major reason not to. Yes, so I would highly recommend doing both years of a master's program. And the reason why is, one, if you do the 2 years and earn the degree, you get access to that recherche d'emploi création entreprise visa. And the second is for the passeport talent salarié. So there are 2 different types of passeport talent, and they changed the requirements. So now this update is in the 2022 edition of Foolproof French Visas. It was not in the previous edition. And it was a change that happened sometime in the last year. There are 2 types of passeport talent visas for salaried employees. There's the passeport talent salarié and the passeport talent carte bleue européenne. Now, both of those require a master's. The carte bleue européenne makes it very easy to switch from one European country to another if you have an international job that like transfers you from, you know, Amsterdam to Paris or Paris to Berlin or wherever. Each country sets their own requirements for the carte bleue européenne, and in France, the requirement for that card is a job that pays about 54,000 euros a year. Now, that doesn't seem like a very high salary for a lot of Americans, but it is a salary more than like 97% of French people who are salaried employees. That's a very high salary for France. It is an extraordinary salary for somebody who is just graduating from a master's program. Like maybe an MBA graduate, maybe would get that type of salary. So knowing how high that salary is, that is open to someone with a master's degree from any university in the world, let's say. The passeport talent salarié, the new requirement is that the master's degree has to be from a French university specifically. And in that case, the salary requirement for a graduating master's student is about 37,000 euros. Still more than about 90% of French people, what they earn in a year if they're salaried employees. So still a very high salary for France. But again, like I said, if you don't have the 2-year degree from a French university, a master's or its equivalent, then you won't qualify for the Passeport Talent Salarié. So you'd have to go for the very highest level, which is the Carte Bleue Européenne. What experiences have other clients or group members had with obtaining a work visa at the end of a student visa or switching to a job seeker visa? If one did switch to a job seeker and did not find qualifying employment after the year, can they switch again to another type like profession libérale if they meet the requirements? Yes. So that was the big change. It used to be called APS, Autorisation Provisoire de Séjour, at the end of your 2-year master's program. And a couple years ago, I couldn't tell you exactly when, around the publication of the first edition of Foolproof French Visas, so about 2.5 years ago, the visa type switched from APS to Recherche d'Emploi, Création d'entreprise. So with that came the possibility of now being able to start a business or create a profession libérale, freelance self-employment activity at the end of that 1 year if you didn't have a job. It used to be that once you were on APS, you could only switch to one of the salaried worker visa types. And so that opportunity was expanded to enable you to switch also to one of the self-employment or business creator visa types at the end of that 1 year. And the other advantage of the Recherche d'Emploi Création d'entreprise status is that it also enables you to register an auto entrepreneur activity on that. So you're still not allowed to be auto entrepreneur on a student visa, but once you're on Recherche d'Emploi Création d'entreprise, you can register as an auto entrepreneur. And then you can build up your income, you can, start invoicing clients, and obviously that plays into your favor when you eventually go to change your status from Recherche d'Emploi Création d'entreprise over to Profession libérale. And again, this is all covered in depth in Foolproof French Visas. All right, Caroline. My long stay familial visa will expire on April 20th, 2022. I have a meeting at the Préfecture in Épinal to renew my visa so that it's a carte de séjour on March 31st. I have a flight scheduled on May 28th to travel back to the US. Will I be able to leave the country if my application is still processing? Yes, when you are renewing a carte de séjour or renewing a visa into a carte de séjour and you're keeping the same status, you are able to travel using your expired visa or your expired carte de séjour along with the récépissé. So you can absolutely cross borders with those two documents together. You will get a récépissé at your appointment. It is like paper printed on a dot. It's like a piece of cardboard printed on a dot matrix printer in the Préfecture that will have your photo on it, and it will have all the details, and it'll say that it's a renewal, for example. It'll say your status, have your name and address, all of that good stuff. And that document extends the validity of your existing visa or carte de séjour, usually for 4 months. And during that time, obviously, they will produce the card and message you to go pick it up. So you are able to travel with that document along with the original card. So it is not a travel document in and of itself, but it is valid, or it extends the validity of your existing visa or carte de séjour. So Carrie's question is, my husband will be coming as a student visa. What visa am I eligible for besides a visitor visa? So you can absolutely apply for a profession libérale visa. You can apply for any visa type that you meet the requirements for. So again, I would encourage you to read Foolproof French Visas and check out the section on profession libérale to see if that's something that would be useful for you. If you haven't found a job that is willing or able to sponsor you, that basically rules out all of the salaried employment types. If you're under 35, there are a couple of temporary work programs that you might be eligible for the length of your husband's program. For example, if you have a master's degree or in a graduate program, you could potentially teach English or teach something at university as a lecturer. You could potentially get hired for a salaried job and get a visa through the French American Chamber of Commerce program, which allows you to work for up to 18 months. So, but those type of things that you'd have to get a job sort of near your husband, basically, and where he's going to be in school. And then there's timing issues as well. So it takes a little bit longer to get those types of visas approved. They have to be approved through an organization called DREETS. So you would have to do that sort of along the same timeline as your husband's student visa application. In terms of getting your children enrolled before arrival, normally the thing to do will be to contact the mairie of the town where you're going to be living and submit paperwork. So, I mean, that's something that we do for our clients before they apply for their visas. And we basically get them pre-enrolled in a particular town and get a confirmation form from the local mairie. And then we just have to inform the mairie of their actual start date once you're going to get your visa and arrive in France. So Donna's question is, she's in the UK. What is the best visa for wishing to relocate permanently but continuing to work remotely for a UK company? If the UK company is not registered in France and does not have employees in France, then you're basically going to have to create your own entity and be a consultant for them. There's really no, if a company does not have a French presence, then they don't have employees in France and they can't have employees in France. If they do want to set up a French presence, then they can send you as a international company transfer, which is a passport talent visa for a maximum of 3 years. And then there are a couple of different ways that they can get you set up here. They have to set up a French-based accounting. They have to do something called portage salarial, which is basically like you become an employee through that company and they pay all your social charges and make sure they're paying social charges in France. And it can be kind of complicated. The other issue with international company transfer is that it doesn't allow for you to stay more than 3 years. It is absolutely 1000% not renewable or extendable under any circumstances after 3 years. So if you want to stay potentially long-term, that's not a good option for you. You can theoretically do something called portage salarial, or do the portage salarial option on a profession libérale visa, according to one that I've spoken to, but I'm not convinced that the consulate would accept a self-employment visa application with a portage salarial situation attached to it, for the simple reason that portage salarial makes you a salaried employee, whereas profession libérale is what you do when you're self-employed. Normally, the way we do it with our clients is we take their existing job as the basis for creating a consulting or self-employment activity. And what that means is we look for opportunities to turn an existing job or existing thing that our clients do, turn their job description into what would this look like if I were offering this as a consulting service or a small business. And then we look for opportunities to, like, okay, what kind of French clients could we potentially have? What are other clients? Where are other potential clients hanging out? What type of service would they be looking for? What type of price would they be willing to pay? And we turn it into what that would look like as a business. Now, the UK company could then continue to be one of your consulting clients for that particular field or set of tasks. And I mean, the way you do it is basically you're on retainer for them, or you have a certain number of tasks that are tied to a particular project and you're invoicing them monthly or whatever. But then on top of that, you have to potentially solicit other clients in France or in Europe as well. And this is something that I work with my clients on when we're writing our business plan, is we take a look at what the opportunities would be to work with people or companies in France. And then we include any potential collaborations or networking opportunities or things like that as part of the visa application to show that there's an actual French business opportunity happening. And yeah, as an auto entrepreneur, you're required to have more than one client at some point during the calendar year. So looking for the opportunity to collaborate with somebody else enables you to have a self-employment visa and set up your own activity and be completely separate from the French or from the non-French or from the UK company. What is the income requirement to relocate permanently a family of 5? That really depends on what visa type and what your assets are and whether or not you own a house and a lot of different factors. I would say in general, for a single person, they're looking at about 1,600 euros per month. For a family of 5, they're looking probably at about 3,000 to 3,500 a month. It's not as high as you might think. It's not. They don't, for example, they don't double the income requirement for a partner, or they don't, or the asset requirement. The other thing in terms of income or asset requirement for multiple people is you have 2 things that they're looking at when you're not coming on a retirement visa. So if you're coming on a retirement visa, what they care about is cash in the bank. They don't care about, they might, if you're actually retired and you're over 63, 65-ish, then they'll also care about what retirement distributions you might have, what pensions you'll get, stuff like that. If you're under retirement age, they care about actual cash in the bank that you could access today, and they care potentially about how much money you're going to have coming in. So when you're looking at doing something like starting a company or doing a profession libérale visa or being freelance or whatever, they're also going to look at, okay, what contracts does this person have that already exist? Like, do they actually have clients? Do they have a lot of business expenses? Do they have future income sources? And, how long are these contracts? How many hours of work are they going to be? Is it for a long term? So there's also like a sort of holistic appreciation of not just the cash in the bank, but also are you going to have money coming in? Autumn's question. Passeport talent, profession artistique et culturelle. Recommendations for bilingual schools within an hour of Paris. So there's a book from the AAWE, which is the Association of American Wives of, I think it used to be Wives of Europeans, and now it's like Women in Europe or something. They have published a book, and there was a new edition just published in 2021, I believe, and it lists all of the bilingual schools in and around Paris. Well, in France generally, and it sort of gives a little review and what their pedagogy is about and all of that different stuff. So I would highly recommend checking that out. You can just Google like AAWE Paris, and it's called like Guide to Education in France or something. They have multiple books. They have another one about high school and college and like college applications for bilingual students who have been educated in France as well. So very good resource. I would say that if you want to send your children into one of those schools, you want to look at living in the west or the southwest of Paris, and looking west in like the Saint-Germain-des-Prés, Le Vésinet area, which is as expensive as living in Paris. It's in Les Yvelines. There, a lot of the bilingual schools are out there. I'm over in the east of Paris, and there's like 2. And one of them is very hard to get into, and the other one it's fairly new, so I don't know much about it. But yeah, most of them are over on the west side of Paris. There's one more question in here. So again, feel free, if you have other questions, put them in the chat or in the Q&A box. The last question that was submitted here is from Jennifer. If I have residency under a Passeport Talent visa, can I go and study in another EU country temporarily from October to May? What kind of Passeport Talent visa? For how many years? Are you going to be able to fulfill the obligations of your Passeport Talent visa during that time? You would still be required to get a student visa for that other EU country. The French visa would not cover you in another Schengen country for more than 90 days. So another issue would be, if you apply for a student visa, for another EU country, does it void the visa that you already have for France, given that they're all Schengen visas? So I would be very careful about spending extended periods of time. And it, like I said, again, it partially depends on what type of visa it is. but I would say generally not a great idea. What is the equivalent of an EB1A, alien of extraordinary ability? I love the idea. I always think it's hilarious that foreigners are called aliens. In the US and France, my husband is British and immigrated to the US 18 years ago on this one to work in the entertainment industry. We're now considering relocating to France. Is there a similar visa in France? What documents are needed? Okay, so it sounds like the closest equivalent would be the profession artistique et culturelle, which is basically an artist visa. And that visa enables you to do any type of work as long as it's linked to a particular project, and that the project is something that you're going to outline in a sort of business plan. There's also, depending on how extraordinary his ability is, there's also a visa called like personne de renommée, which is the famous person visa. And you sort of have to prove that you're famous and renowned in your field. Now, it doesn't necessarily have to be like Beyonce famous, but it has to be like serious professional publications in your field would write about you, or you would, I don't know, have really substantial and impressive professional credentials. You would also have to, again, have some type of what project are you doing in France? Where is the money, where is the money coming from? Do you have opportunities to work and generate income in France? And any supporting documents related to those things are what you're going to be putting into the business plan and then into the visa application itself. Any other questions? Because I think we're almost done. I'm done with all of the ones that were pre-submitted to me. I'm going to take a look on the Facebook stream and see if anybody posted it. Do check out Foolproof French Visas if you have visa questions. It will tell you everything you need to know, everything you've ever wanted to know, and probably a lot of things that you don't actually want to know about French visas, and specifically answer your questions about which one is the right visa type and what are my long-term options if I want to stay in France for more than a couple of years. Do these visas lead to residency or naturalization? What visa can my spouse come on? All of that kind of stuff. What time frame should be allowed for processing visas? That depends on the visa type. We would be looking at a couple of weeks after your visa application. I would say 2 weeks maximum. I just had one client apply in Edinburgh. Somebody recognized her at the, she's an artist and an actor, and somebody actually recognized her at the visa office, which was pretty funny. She had her visa back in, I think, a week to the day. If it's other types of passeport talent, if it's a salaried visa, they can take a really long time. And I don't even like to give an estimate because you just have to make sacrifices to the visa gods. But I do kind of estimate I lay out all the steps in the Foolproof French Visas book and how long approximately each one should take. So for example, if you have to get a work contract approved by Direct, or sorry, it's Streets now, it used to be called Direct. Normally that takes about 8 weeks. So add that on to the actual processing time of having your VFS appointment and getting the visa from VFS. Student visa, you have multiple steps. You have the application step of applying to the academic program. You have the Campus France step of having them verify your course of study and interviewing you and the things that go along with that. And that takes 3 weeks. You can expedite it by paying twice as much and get it processed in 3 days. I believe that option is open back up now. And then you have the visa application process itself. It also depends a little bit on the time of year and if a lot of people are on vacation, or if the office has to close for a week because everybody has COVID, which has happened a couple of different times at all of the consulates basically in the past 2 years. So yeah, the book lays out my best estimate, but it's a little bit, it depends, like with everything. Can you talk a little bit more about the profession artistique for musician? What would be needed project-wise to be approved for a musical artist visa? So for any type of visa where you're going to be self-employed or have any kind of independent activity, you have to show a couple of things. You have to show where's the money coming from, do you have contacts and projects that will enable you to make enough to cover your expenses, living expenses? And, do you understand sort of what you're going to have to do in France to register your activity and to operate it? So this is one of the things, especially when we're doing a profession artistique visa, that we work on with our clients. So when you are a musician, you have a lot of different opportunities for showing that you're going to be able to make money, right? So you have performing, you have teaching, whether giving private lessons as a musician, whether it's being a contracted teacher in a school of some kind, music school, conservatory, music program, being a paid member of an orchestra or a choir or something. You have recording music and earning royalties potentially. So a lot of different opportunities to include these different things in a business plan or a project plan. And you also have to consider each one of these is a separate kind of tax registration. The money you make from performing in a play, in an orchestra, in whatever, is going to be declared as performance income, and there's a status called intermittent du spectacle. And then income that you might get from doing recording music is going to be royalties. And that's going to be a separate thing through something called the Maison des Artistes. And then if you also teach music, it could be salaried income if you're on a contract for a certain number of hours per week with a music school, or it could be self-employment income because you're registered as an auto entrepreneur, as an independent music teacher. So your business or project plan has to include any or all of those things in any combination that you want, basically. And, how you're going to do each one, and sort of demonstrating that what you're doing, and you know what the process looks like to register those things in France, and that you have opportunities to do those different things for money. So supporting letters, programs for shows that you've been in, income declarations for your previous income as a musician, stuff like that. It's really important, or at least that we did have one of these applications that was rejected. We don't have many rejections when we apply for visas for our clients. We very rarely get a rejection. But we did have one last year during COVID. Part of the rejection was due to the fact that music was just not happening in venues. There were not opportunities for musicians who were already in France, and even fewer for people who are not yet here, excuse me. But this particular person had a contract or an agreement with a friend who was not from France, who had a recording studio in France, and they were going to record something in France and then release it in South America. And one of the issues that the consulate tried to navigate with us was, yes, but the money's not coming from anywhere in France or Europe. So why are they even doing this in France? Now, part of that, like I said, was due, this is when there were travel restrictions. Travel wasn't even allowed into France. It wasn't even legal to go into a recording studio. So it was definitely, they pushed the timeline a little bit. They wanted to rush it. But one of the things that I do insist on heavily when I'm working with somebody on any kind of self-employment activity or any kind of artistic musical activity is, where can we find the opportunities for earning money in France and more largely in Europe, but focusing specifically, or as much as we can, on France. Do we have any more questions? Follow-up question on the profession artistique visa. So say my husband was going for the musician artist visa, could he include my revenue as part of the income he had to supplement his potential earnings? Do they look at a couple for visa applications, even if pursuing different visas from each other? Okay, so if your husband is going for the profession artistique et culturelle visa, then that is going to be in the passeport talent category, which means that you as the spouse would get a passeport talent vie privée visa. That means that you do not have to provide a separate business plan and a separate visa application for a profession libérale activity. What that means is that they're going to be looking and focusing primarily on his income, and they're going to be looking at his income and your assets in total. If you think that it makes your application a lot stronger to have your income potentially in there as well, then I would say we want to do a separate visa application for you. They might still end up giving you the spouse of a passeport talent holder visa that would enable you to pursue being self-employed with a profession libérale visa, an auto entrepreneur activity. But otherwise, like they're not going to consider the spouse's income in, if it's an artist visa application, they only consider the income of that one person in the application. They're not going to consider the spouse's income. She says, thank you. I bought the book. It's great. Thanks. Well, I will appreciate your review on Amazon or by email when you've had the opportunity to fully read or appreciate it. Yeah, so I've never had anybody do it that way, do a profession artistique for one partner and then do a separate business visa for the other partner. But if the money opportunities for the musician or the artist applicant look a little dicey, I would just want to make sure that visa application is as strong as we can make it. All right, anything else? What are the main visas that allow a family to come over on one and for a spouse to work? Anything in the passport talent category. So these are covered in, like I said, in foolproof French visas, but I'll go through them quickly right now. So there's passport talent investor, which is you're investing 300,000 euros or more in a company. I've never done one of those. Passport talent entrepreneur, we've done quite a few of these. It's when you're investing 30,000 euros in the startup capital of your own company that you're creating. Passport talent carte bleue européenne, which is, I mentioned it very early in the call, where you have a master's degree and you're earning a salary of about 54,000 euros or more per year from a French company. Passport talent salarié, which is you have a 2-year master's degree from a French institution or its equivalent from its equivalent institution in France. It has to specifically be a French educational institution that issues the degree. And you earn a salary of about 37,000 euros per year. I don't remember the exact amount off the top of my head, but it's readily available. Those ones for sure. There's also Jeune Entreprise Innovante, which is if it's a tech company, this would be like the visa commonly known as the French tech visa. If you get hired by a company, which it has to be less than a certain size, I want to say it's like less than 50 employees, less than 8 million euros in annual revenue, less than 7 years old. Those particular things, I don't quote me 100% on that. It's in the book, but fact check me on those 3 criteria for the company. They have to like prove that they're doing some kind of like innovative project and get a specific status from an organization that oversees young innovative companies. And then they can hire people with a salary of 37,000 euros a year, same salary as for the Passport Talent Salarié, and give them a Passport Talent Jeune Entreprise Innovante. I think the only one, there's the Passport Talent Profession Artistique et Culturelle. That's for your visual artists, your musicians, your authors, anything that could potentially be in an artist category. There's Personne de Renommée, which is basically like the famous person visa, and you have to show that you're famous in your field, which they're really vague on it. It could be like you're the gold medal winner of the professional underwater basket weaving world championships. It could be that you're like Beyonce. It could be that you're, I don't know, the world specialist in, I don't know, creating otter exhibits at zoos. Like whatever your field is, like you're the most famous, bestest person doing that thing with the proof to back it up. And there's one that I'm leaving out, which is the international company transfer is technically under the Passeport Talent umbrella, but that's for a maximum of 3 years and it can't be renewed. So your spouse does get to come with you and potentially work, but none of that counts towards like residency or naturalization or anything, because the visa can't be renewed. You would have to go back to your home country. As of this time, there's no limit to how many of those particular visas you can have consecutively, but because you have to start over every 3 years, you don't build up the capital in terms of getting residency or naturalization or anything like that. So I think those are all of them. I don't know how many I just said, but I'm pretty sure that's all of the Passeport Talent visa types. They are all covered in foolproof French visas with their specific criteria. So read the book. Anything else? All right, cool. Well, thank you all for coming. And the next Q&A is going to be on Monday, April 4th is the date, I want to say. Yes, Monday, April 4th, same time, same place, 7 p.m. France time. And we'll go for as long as we have questions. You can submit them online in advance, and I will provide the link below the video recording. I'm going to be posting these on YouTube so you can watch the replay. And then the May Q&A is going to be the second Monday. I think May, June, July are all going to be the second Monday of the month because there's holidays, school vacations, and things like that. So yeah, thanks for coming, and read Foolproof French Visas to answer all your visa questions, and including the ones you didn't know you were going to have. Have a good rest of your day and take care. Bye.